Building Bridges is a conversation series that started here at the Holocaust Museum during the pandemic. And the idea was we bring leaders together from various and diverse communities across Los Angeles. We talk about issues that cut across different, cultural communities and divides, and not to necessarily answer questions, but to kind of come together and just hear what others have to say and what's going on. So we've presented this on a multitude of different topics. The topic tonight is very specifically tied to the upcoming MLK Day, and I want to draw your attention to the photo up there on the top right of MLK marching with Rabbi Heschel. MLK had a wonderful relationship with several rabbis, and of course the Jewish and the Black community were united in the struggle for civil rights. So we always like to honor that here. We thought it would be interesting to hear from religious leaders today. How does it feel to be a religious leader at a time when perhaps community is at, in turmoil? There are things happening. People are upset. People need answers. They're looking for a moral compass. They're looking for a framing. And so we've assembled a group of leaders who speak to people all the time of various faiths. And so I'm so honored and thankful that you're all here tonight. So our moderator tonight is Rabbi Sarah Hronsky. She's the president of the Los Angeles Interfaith Council. She's served Temple Beth Hillel Valley Village since 2003, and her rabbinate is filled with teaching, counseling, and liturgical exploration. She's currently president of the Board of Rabbis of Southern California, and she also served on the board of the Pacific Association of Reform Rabbis. So joining our panel down here, Pastor William D. Smart. He is the president and CEO of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference of Southern California. He's also the co-pastor of the Christ Liberation Ministries in Los Angeles, where he serves with his wife. Rabbi Toba Shaler is joining us tonight. She serves as the Jewish community as senior Jewish educator and director of student life for Hillel at UCLA. Rabbi Toba, as students call her, was ordained through HUC JIR in New York in 2016 and received her master's in religious education from HUC in 2015. Her rabbinate has included roles in congregations, camping, day school, and more. Haipin Im joins us tonight. She is a U.S. presidential appointee on the board of the Corporation for National and Community Service. She's the president and founder of Faith and Community Empowerment, FACE, a national nonprofit empowering churches and nonprofits to leverage their resources by building capacity, leadership, and partnerships in economic development, and serving as a bridge between the Asian American community and the greater community. Haipin also currently serves, she let me know today, on the U.S. Department of Homeland Security Secretary's Faith-Based Security Advisory Council. And joining us, Mohammed Akbar Khan. He is a faith leader based here in LA with more than 30 years of experience with conflict resolution, humanitarian aid, multi-faith promotion, and youth development. He currently serves as executive board member of the Faith-Based Advisory Council for the LA County Department of Mental Health, on the Community Advisory Board for the Los Angeles County Assessor, Jeffrey Prang, on the Faith-Based Advisory Council for LA City Attorney Mike Fuhrer, and as a board member of the New Star Family Justice Center. So we are in amazing hands tonight with amazing leaders. So Rabbi Sarah, take it away.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for these beautiful introductions. Thank you for joining us. We are really thinking heavily about Martin Luther King Jr., his ministry, his social activism, his leadership. He was a fierce orator and a fierce persona seeking justice. He sought justice in a way that would bring all people in a space of equality, and pluralism and beloved community were a significant part of his ministry. He felt religion was at its best when it promoted peace, understanding, love, and goodwill. And I think he knew more than anyone, as he was headed towards one of his last speeches at the Masonic Temple, he had rewrote himself because of an assassination attempt. And what he said was, the promised land is in front of us. I may not get to it with you, but the promised land is in front of us. He understood that the legacy that he was leaving was much bigger. Moses, one a great prophet, did not make it into the promised land, but led this journey as best as he could, as did Martin Luther King Jr. He knew the promised land was right there and that we could reach it. The way that the Israelites got to the promised land was by joining hand in hand and walking together. It was struggle and it was hardship, but they did it together. I think we here are excited to share a pluralistic space and reflect a little bit about what it means to use Martin Luther King Jr.'s example of leadership, how it might affect the work that we do, especially within pluralistic spaces. I don't know exactly how far that promised land is to go, but I do know that we're much stronger when we do it together. I thought I would quote from Martin Luther King Jr. when he was asked what he would like to be said about him in a eulogy, what he would like to have happen at his funeral. And he said, "I'd like someone to mention that day that MLK Jr. tried to give his life serving others." He said, "I'd like for somebody to say that day that MLK Jr. tried to love somebody. And I want you to say that I tried to love and serve humanity." It's a pretty tall order. Love someone, love and serve humanity, and that he gave his life in the service of others. So I wanted to know from our amazingly esteemed colleagues here, how do you want future generations to remember you in the work that you're doing, the ministries that you host, and your leadership? How do you want to be remembered? We're not writing your eulogies, but when you are directing your path and your ministries, and when you're in service to others, you're hoping to leave some kind of a legacy, some kind of a mark. And so, Pastor Smart, will you begin?
I knew she would.
Why not? Why not, sir?
I sat, Hyper said, if I'm going to get in the middle so I won't be called down first, I said, watch. And I said, far down here. First of all, this is my first time being here. My second time being here. I was here last year to be in this space last year, and thank you, Jen, and for inviting me back. This is real important to me because, as you mentioned, I'm the president of the only organization that Dr. Martin Luther King founded, and he founded our chapter here in Los Angeles in 1967. And so, in 1963. And I'm so glad to actually be a part of this work. I went to in 1968, the year that he died. I was just 9 years old, and actually miraculous things started happening. I started preaching that year because it was a calling. And so I prepared. I went to college. I went to divinity school, other trainings, all around the lens of Martin Luther King. And so when I finally got called to be the president of his organization here in Los Angeles, I said, hey, I have reached a plateau that I wanted to do all of my life, and is to serve in this capacity. And so I'm glad to be here and be in the midst of this outstanding panel. I thought last year's panel was, but these are I'm gonna just say, these some heavy cats up here. But I just want people to remember that not only in the model of Dr. King that I tried to serve and help somebody, but I want to say that I tried to liberate. All of my life, I tried to liberate. I'm a liberator of people. And what that means to me, that means that I don't get caught up in the labels that we put on people. People have a right to live their life as they want to without bringing harm to other people. They have a right to be on a quest to do whatever they feel can really to help and that's empowerment to bring people from where they are to where they ought to be. I want people to know that I feed the hungry. I clothe the naked. I visit those in jail. All of that is a form of liberation. All of that, but more than that, I help people to find jobs like my sister here does, because all of that is a part of liberation. So I want to be a liberator. I want all of us to be liberators and empower people to move. I've had situations that I've never thought that I would change. There are issues that are facing America and the world that I'm on the side of it that I never thought I'd be on that side. But I'm there because that's the empowering position.
Wow, I think that is a beautiful, beautiful legacy to leave. Rabbi.
I feel a little intimidated going after that one.
I hear you.
But,
I hear you.
I currently serve college students on campus, and so that has really impacted my picture of who I am and what I do and how I serve our community. I hope when my time in this role or my time on this earth is gone, that people look back at the work that I've done and know and remember and feel that whether they agreed with me or not, or the stance I took, that it always came from a place of chesed, of loving kindness, of care for other human beings, rather than a place of fear or reach for power or any of those things. And I hope my students in particular that I work with now look back and say that I helped them understand that you can hold multiple truths and that you can hold difficult things and feel many things at once. And it's hard for college students sometimes. It's not always the easy thing. And so I work hard to perpetuate that on campus.
I think your students really need that lesson right now, that you can hold more than one truth and more than one narrative at your heart. And leading with chesed, with compassion, 100% how MLK walked that journey. Beautiful.
My name is Hay Pinim, and I serve as President and CEO of a nonprofit called Faith and Community Empowerment. And the acronym is FACE. And we say that we strive to bring the face of God through service and lift those who are faceless. And so I think in that note, for me, there are a couple of verses in the Bible that I hope that when I meet my Maker, that first he will say to me, well done, good and faithful servant, and this is my beloved daughter in whom I am well pleased. I think on a practical manner, I love the story of Susan Boyle with Britain's Got Talent, in which she came on stage, and because she didn't look the part, everyone dissed her. But as soon as she opened her mouth and started to sing and shine her light, the audience and the judges, they turned around instantaneously. There was no training on diversity or, loving kindness or whatever, but when they saw and recognized her gifting, that was such a powerful, transformative moment in which the people were able to be blessed by her gift, and also then Susan's life also changed as well. And it's powerful in that her gifting was there before and after. It was the same gift, but that platform and the mentorship made the world of a difference in allowing her to be a global star. And so for me, I'm really about empowering each individual, each community, I would even say even buildings, wherever, helping each entity to be able to reach their full God-given potential, and allowing them to find a place where they could shine. I think then, just like that moment of hate that Susan Boyle experienced, but instantaneously there was like this turnaround, that's the world that I would strive to create. And I hope that I will be able to, when I die, that will be a part of my legacy. And one last piece is that at times it takes courage to be able to stand on the side of God, whatever that may mean. And so in that way, I pray that I can continue to stay and keep or sustain my integrity, to be standing with those who are hurting, to those who are standing on the right side of God. And as you mentioned, perhaps that could be very complex. You know, there is the TED Talk of the danger of a single story. There is no one single story. And so again, a leader that can understand that nuance and be able to navigate with wisdom.
In multitudes of times, we count the people. But counting the people is not 1, 2, 3. It's lifting up the face and seeing the other as a whole. Through that mentorship and leadership you're doing, you are making each person shine as an individual star. It's beautiful. So I said, what's a good title? And he said, faith leader? So I can't say pastor. Mohammed, would you please share with us?
First of all, it's a really pleasure and an honor to be here. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Pastor. Good seeing you again. When you're in a company of lights, I'm here sitting next to people who are spiritually lit up. And I'm in a museum. We're in a museum that historically reminds us of the pain of yesterday. And Martin Luther King, what I think about, and I also think about Prophet Moses, peace be upon him. Thank you, Rabbi. There's a prayer in the Quran when Prophet Moses was exiled, and he was put in the middle of the desert, really to die a slow, torturous death. He wasn't supposed to live. And it was a beautiful prayer. I always use this prayer. It said, "Oh God, I am in desperate need of whatever good you can send." And we attribute that to Prophet Moses, peace be upon him. People like Prophet Moses, they didn't choose their path. God chose their path. The miracle was Pharaoh was killing children, babies, because he had an idea a savior is coming. But he actually raised Moses, peace be upon him. Martin Luther King, God chose him as a tool. And Pastor Smart, when we are in the world of faith and trying to uplift lives of others, and when I look at those people who sacrificed, suffered, put others before themselves, and as you said, as you quoted Dr. King, he had an optimistic future because he knew the promised land is coming, but he won't live in it, but he strove for it for others. And so what I think about myself, I would say I would want to be known as a unifier. God loves unity. Every human being is special. When I pray, my heart has no language, my thoughts have no language. God reads that in every individual. My vowels and syllables could be Arabic, Hebrew, Chinese, but God is reading our hearts and our thoughts. And I think that Dr. King, I don't want to be lengthy, but I had a really beautiful experience in Jerusalem where I was there at a peace conference. And that's why I love seeing you, Pastor Smart, because you remind me of that moment where I met Dr. King, Martin Sr., his son. But also, I met a rabbi that was very unique. He was also one of the rabbis that marched with Dr. King. His name is Rabbi Ben Ami from Harrisburg. And then he lost his job at the Temple because it was dangerous. So Dr. King also gave him a title, Civil Rights Rabbi. But what was so beautiful is hearing all his stories with Dr. King and what he did in the terms of sacrifice and service. And to end, Rabbi told me, Muhammad, I could take you to all the evangelical leaders in this country. Pat Roberts, he just named them. He said, they all know me because I convinced them to respect Jews in Israel. So I want to take you so they respect Muslims. And that's unifying people, unifying hearts, because everyone's special. So if I were to be remembered, that would be it.
You can't be a unifier unless you're willing to connect and see people as whole. And I think that's a lot of what we're saying when you're looking at Martin Luther King and his approach through pluralism and the thought of beloved community. It's really, it's getting into my heart. He really felt that we should be the mutuality and interconnectedness, and the world is a web, so to speak. A quote from his letter from Birmingham, he said, "We are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. We're tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one person directly affects all indirectly. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." So the question that I'm going to pose, and I'm coming to the rabbi first, so you get to go last. Okay. Do you agree with Martin Luther King about the network of mutuality? If so, how does it play out for you in your religious work that you're performing now? And if not, how is the community you serve so uniquely separate from this world that he is claiming is so interconnected?
So as a rabbi, as a Jew, community and the understanding that who we are as individuals impacts those around us and those communities around us, and that we are all in it together is a fundamental idea in Judaism that I have grown up with. And so I do believe that we are all connected. And I also believe that the sort of analogy that we're all in the same storm, but we have different boats. So that our experiences are different. In the space that I work in now, the Jewish students have a very different experience from other white-presenting students. The Jewish students have a very different experience from other minority students. And so finding the balance between the many pieces of their identity and relating to the many pieces of other people's identity is a challenge, but an exciting one.
I think there's so many examples in real life, and yet we forget. And our default, I think, tendency is to be self-focused. But in terms of just big picture, long term, it all comes back. So on just the practical level, even like on homelessness, I think there were theories about, helping people if they're ready, right? So if they quit drugs, if they do this and that. And so there were a lot of like conditions that have been set up. But then other studies that I have read show that actually, housing first, that will actually lead them to a much better place. And if you don't, they will go to the ER, and it costs society and all of us so much more. And so as we're walking down the street, if we just ignore all the people and the pain that's around us, it will ultimately come back as a society. And I remember doing a program, a leadership program through the Southern California Leadership Network. And it was a very interesting game. They divided us up into like 3 teams, and we were given each a bag full of different colored chips. And they were told we were told to like exchange with one another, right? And each round, like whoever had the most colored chips, high value, like we get moved out and da-da-da. Ultimately, what we found out was that they were recreating society. So one group was like the lower class, the second was the middle class, and the one group was the high class. So they got all the high-colored chips, and I was stuck in the low class, right? And there was just like this moment of realization that I was stuck, and no matter what I was able to do, I was going to be stuck there. And suddenly, like, all the fun and the hope just went out the window, and it was scary to see me, how I shifted, and I thought, okay, how do I make this interesting? Well, you know what? What can I do to sabotage others, right? And so I think, again, there is that mutuality that if you don't give hope to those around you, whatever little gains that you have, it will be sabotaged. It will be at risk. And finally, I want to say that for Korea, which is still divided between North and South Korea, I am very grateful to the United Nations, but especially the United States, who came, and that's why at least South Korea is still a democracy. And I was free to be able to even immigrate to the United States. But in that American soldier, there was a large portion of American black soldiers who came and served and also lost their lives, for which, again, I am grateful, especially in light of the Martin Luther King holiday and, as well. And one last piece is that, again, it was the US government that came and invested in South Korea. And it was the US missionaries who came to Korea to help pass on the gospel as a Christian. And in terms of economy, President Obama said way back then, our South Korean economy was the same as Kenya. And now Korea is one of the leading nations, but also a major trading partner for the United States. Also, South Korea, after the United States, sends out the greatest number of missionaries in the world. And so I just cannot imagine, like for me, like on a very practical level, I would think, you know what, the US has enough souls to save, you know, there's so many people in need, why go and invest in some foreign country that, especially back then, there was no airplane, there was no whatever. I mean, it took days and days and days to some unknown country, why go and use our US resources and US lives? And yet, there's like that full circle in which, again, Korea is a major partner. You know, we joined the United States during the Vietnam War and other things like that. So that whole concept of mutuality, we cannot forget and be focused on the short term and be, you know, self-absorbed.
We understand that MLK Jr., for him it was one house of people, one beloved community, which meant that multiple communities would come together to promote economic justice and racial justice and stand up against imperialism. On that bloody Sunday in the March on Selma in 1965, King brought together priests, nuns, Episcopal seminarians, Unitarian Universalists, Jewish leaders. He brought together multitudes of people from multitudes of faiths, across age spectrum and across racial spectrum. My question to you is, what role does interfaith work play for you in the work that you do, especially here in the Los Angeles community, and who might some of your partners be?
Well, you know, we're I always say that, well, I look at it this way. Our body is just a container that's carrying a soul, and the soul is from the Creator. So don't get confused by looking at a container. You know, and if you do want to look at a container, we belong to the human race. We're all children of Adam. And so my work, ever since I started as a young person, is always making sure that there's a multi-faith approach to spirituality, to serving the unhoused. In my early youth years, I used to give sermons in the prisons. You know, as a student, I'd go into the jails, and probably Pastor Smart, you can relate to this. When you're in a prison setting and you got a Friday prayer service, Muslim services, you'll see a former Blood and a former Crip. And I always tell these folks, you know, you didn't join a new gang called Islam. So we don't do religious banging. So if you left gang banging, you didn't join a new gang to do religious banging. And the point is that our differences is our uniqueness. Life would be boring if we were all one faith. That's God's plan. It's not even our plan. So this is why, you know, working with Hyphen M, the Korean community, when you had all this crisis and there was just the rioting going on, and in those days, I had the network of former gangsters, you know, and some of them were even telling me, did you see me go in that store? You know, and there was chaos, and those days the goal was to bridge the gap between Black and Korean. That's what we do. So in terms of Dr. King and the mosaic, you know, Dr. King, like Prophet Moses, peace be upon him, they came to wake up the moral consciousness of human being. So multi-faith harmony, that's what you do. You wake up the moral consciousness of human being. So we all do it in our own way. Rabbi, you do it. We're all doing it. If anyone's a faith leader in LA and he or she's not part of a multi-faith circle, personally, I don't think they get it.
Harmony is hard to come by, and it takes work and effort, and it takes relationship building, 100% to have it be fruitful and meaningful, and it takes work. I think it's holy work, but it takes work. Pastor Smart, what role does interfaith community play in the work that you do?
Well, I give you an example. Today, we had one of our activities was our interfaith prayer breakfast. My sister here spoke at one several years ago, and we had a Sikh, a Muslim, and a Catholic nun as our prayers today. You know, what I believe in the work that we do is that you have to build coalitions, you have to build alliances, knowing the difference between the two, and to make sure that your organization or the movement that you're a part of has a capacity to make the change that is necessary. And that comes forth through the spirituality of everybody in the group, regardless of their religion. I'm what you call a Schleimarkian. A Schleimarker was a theologian who said that everybody has a God, and their God, and that God is a mediator to the ultimate God. And like the Buddhists have Buddha, Islam has Allah, and all of them are there to bring everybody to the ultimate God. So that way you don't just desecrate anyone's God or their belief system, but you work together with them, okay? And so I've embraced that. And I just believe that I have Jesus. He's my mediator. But everybody else has their own mediator if they're not a Christian. That's okay. You just honor, respect what they do, and don't fight. I think when we can embrace that, we build the consciousness that, and then we understand those principles. I've been a part of CLU. I've been a part of other organizations that we haven't gotten into the things that separate us. We embrace the things that pull us together. And the major thing of it is that all religions believe that justice and righteousness is the way to transform the world.
Amen. Amen. CLU is Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice, so that is the group that he's referring to. Speaking of justice and righteousness, quote from Prophet Amos 5, chapter 5, verse 4, "Vayigel kamayim mishpat tzedakah kenachal etan." Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. This verse were quoted by Martin Luther King Jr. in his I Have a Dream speech. They are words of, that we hold very tightly to in the Jewish faith as well. And I would love it. I'm coming to you first. See, I share the wealth. How does this particular verse come through in the work that you do or in the denomination that you serve? The idea that justice and righteousness shall flow so freely.
I feel like it's a constant aspiration that I think we and everyone strive for and will need to continue to strive for. For me, as I mentioned earlier, there are situations where it is convenient for me to lay low. I don't have to risk my neck or my reputation or my social capital to speak up. And, but I think as a believer, when I think about my calling, my instructions to fight and advocate for righteousness and justice. It takes a lot, but I choose to step forward. But my faith comes in trusting that God will be there for me, whatever that means, as well. And again, I know that, for elected officials, ultimately, there are many situations where someone will come out as a winner and someone will come out on the losing side. But again, that we all strive to seek what is right, what is just, and also how can we create a world where we don't have to fight over a limited piece of the pie, but how can we grow the pie? How can we, if there are not enough seats, how do we expand or enlarge the table, right? So that, again, everyone has a seat at the table. And again, I think there is a part of us that's driven by, again, that consciousness to do the right thing. And at the same time, I go back to the Susan Boyle's, example that if we trust that every individual has that God-given light that we are missing out on by treating them unjustly, without righteousness, that we as a society, we as individuals, that we will lose out. I think that also should be incorporated into this fight for righteousness and justice as well.
When people lose their identity, when we take away their name, we take away who they are as a human being, it's in those spaces when people are turned into insects and vermin and rodents, that in those spaces where cruelty and degradation thrive.
I do want to add one more point. I think that, again, people unless they're like truly just evil, and that one I don't know what to do, but I think people act maybe and make decisions perhaps out of ignorance. And so if there is enlightenment through, again, education, etc., that people can turn around, just like Susan Boyle, right? And so when I think about the Paul, who was formerly named Saul, and he was on the way to Damascus because he felt that Christians were fighting, like they were on the wrong side of God. And so he was there on the right side of God to go and persecute. And in that story, when Jesus shows up and says, you're fighting on the wrong side, in essence, it is his religious conviction that initially got him to go and do the persecution, but it was also then his faith and religious conviction that made him do the 180-degree turnaround as well. And so again, part of my work is really enlightening people, raising awareness, and of, again, the beauty that is in each of our communities, and that we're all in the same storm, maybe not the same boat, but again, that it is in our self-interest to be pursuing righteousness and justice.
Thank you, Ivan. I'm very conscious of time, so I'm trying to move along. It's hard. There's a lot of good things to say. Mohammed, how does righteousness and justice flow through Islam?
Well, there's a verse that says, seek out injustice, even if you have to go against your own self. So justice does not mean just us. And we see it in practicality, like, for example, at the time of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the first 13 years, it was all nonviolence. They did not respond to the atrocities towards them. Prophet Muhammad was a prophet for 23 years. The last 10 years was self-defense. So there were people who were known to persecute. And when Prophet Muhammad and his companions were victorious, they found ways to forgive those people instead of retaliation. So justice, true justice, if you really want to build civilization and society, seeking out justice is one stage, then another stage has to be like conflict resolution. Like President Mandela and Bishop Tutu, they did the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And Dr. King and that whole movement were not colorblind, although they could justify the hatred towards white people, but so justice is not about ourselves, it's really the bigger picture. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I want the two of you to answer one other question, and then we'll probably only have just a few minutes for questions from you, but we'll take just a few. Martin Luther King once said, to discuss Christianity without mentioning other religions would be like discussing the greatness of the Atlantic Ocean without the slightest mention of the many tributaries that keep it flowing. So we know that Martin Luther King was heavily influenced from a variety of places. He grew up in the Black church. He was very influenced by Greek classics, by Gandhian thought, by Howard Thurman, his mentor with the Church of Fellowship of All Peoples. And another influence for him was Mordecai Johnson, a professor and president at Howard University. That was a bit slip. Very different places. That being said, he was exceedingly influenced by all sorts of places, and he had his upbringing, but he took it in from everywhere around him. Pastor Smart, what would you say are some tributaries that influence you?
Wisdom literature from other various religions, I said Malcolm Gladwell, because in his writings, the writings of of course, the Bible, but others. So in divinity school, I studied a lot of writings, as I mentioned, Schleiermacher, but others, how they apply to us today. I can't read something or understand something unless I break it down, how it applies to us today, and what does it drive me to do. That's a tributary for me. That's another source. That's something that, again, empowers me. It's talking to people. It's understanding their mission and understanding why they're doing what they're doing. It's relating to people. I love her. Just met her today. I love her. Listening to her over there talk and her attitude and her spirit, it just inspired me, as these two have for the last couple of years. It's just that, what's empowering is to be around people who you think that thinks different from you, but at the same time you feel their presence and you feel their energy, and you say, hey, we may think differently, but we're still human beings, and we're on this road together, and we may be in different boats, but we're in the same storm. I'm gonna keep up with your boat, and I want you to keep up with my boat.
Beautiful. Rabbi.
So I did actually get to see the questions ahead of time, and I knew this was a question. And I prepared by looking through my Instagram and who am I reading and who am I thinking about, and came ready to talk about the greats of my movement, Abraham Joshua Heschel, for example, and came ready to tell you about the Nat Bishop and the Rest is Resistance, and came ready to share some Instagram profiles. But who I actually want to name is Dr. Bernice Strauss, who is my mother. And my mother was raised by secular political Jews in Canada who did not feel a connection to God or spirituality, who lived through the Holocaust in different ways, and who came out of that experience believing that politics is religion and politics is justice work. My grandfather served time in prison for distributing communist propaganda, and raised my mom to believe that as much as our religion is about lighting candles on Shabbat and coming together to pray with our community, it is about making the world a better place for people. My mom grew up in that world and in that household. She spent her career as a psychologist working for a small state university in Huntsville, Texas, where she devoted herself to programs primarily for minority men and first-generation college students. And the university that she worked at also is close to the biggest penitentiary in Texas, which is also in Huntsville. And so she taught in the penitentiary. I listened to her as a child coming up with the graduation speeches. What is the graduation speech that you give for people who are not going out into the world, but who are staying confined? And I think the influence of my very real family has been the greatest influence in my understanding of all of these concepts.
I think that's beautiful. I was thinking about how influenced Martin Luther King Jr. was by being raised in his family and in his home church, and how, while they are such important influences for him, that he had the openness of mind to allow his philosophical and theological approaches to continue to develop and expand. That he took everything that was at the core and at his roots that were so important and guided him and directed him, and then allowed them to flex and grow when he brought in other influences, other teachers, other tributaries. My friends, we have just a few minutes for you guys to ask questions of our esteemed panel here. Ooh, there are extremists in our world. I'm going to ask one of you to tackle that. What is the best way that you would say we should handle extremists in religious space?
You know, sometimes we make extremists larger than what they are. Sometimes our voices should be louder than extremists, you know, and I think, unfortunately, the media likes those fringe voices for the shock treatment. So it's a challenge. I think no religion, no culture has a monopoly of extremists. We all have extremists in our own midst.
Could I add also? I think that when we define people and label them as extremists, it becomes really difficult. Just as if you say someone's racist, that also becomes like an impossible task. But perhaps if we were to take a step back and look at perhaps they're responding in a human way to human conditions that have been created around them, perhaps then there might be a pathway to change those human conditions that is eliciting this human behavior response. So that is at least a part of the solution.
What was your question? So often in the work we do, we have our own personal opinion. We have the opinion of the denominations that we serve. And then we have folks who just disagree with it and think that our approach is wrong. So I guess the question is, I'll ask you, Rabbi, how do you deal with that?
I work very hard to focus on the ultimate goal, the justice that we're working towards, and to remember and to remind that as long as we have that shared goal, we can argue about the different paths and the different ways to get there. And it's okay to have different perspectives and understandings on the best way to get there, as long as we're really centering the same ultimate goal, which should be justice and chesed and these values.
Pastor, what do you do?
I am similar. I look at the goal and where are we trying to go, and if people don't see it like that, a lot of times, see, we're at war right now. There are all kind of wars going on, and you just have to decide based on your own justice principles, your own social location. You got to decide where you are, and then you have to move forward with those people that you galvanize around you and say, let's move in this direction and get it done. We don't have time because there's too much is at stake right now. And you know, one of the things that's happening this year alone is 3 billion people are voting in 60 countries around the world this year, 2024. And people have got to say, we have to galvanize a movement that says that one of the ways we can fix a lot of this chaos of the rise of dictators and all of this is the innocent people have to begin to vote. And I'm just saying, if someone disagrees with that right now, but you say, okay, you disagree, me and us over here, we're going to go on and make that happen regardless of what you feel. We believe that's an answer for the world. So that's how you have to deal with some people. You have to be a part of the right movement and make sure that movement you are being led. You might disagree with this. You are being led by the principles of your God.
It takes a lot of ometz lev. It takes a lot of courage to hold really fast to what it is that you have defined as the goal. And then to also see that other human being's opinion as what I would call recordable, listened to, heard. For the Jewish people, we record all the voices in our Talmud, all the voices. There's, the joke, there's 2 people, there's 4 opinions, 3 opinions, yes, yes, and yes. We record them all. But gosh, does it take a whole lot of courage and heart to figure out how to stay on your goal and how to galvanize those folks around you. And you could be on the wrong side of history. but most likely you will not be if you hold tightly to your teachings and to your convictions. But all those other voices are still recorded in our tradition. They're still held, and that matters. Last question, sir. So you're saying, I think I heard you, but I might not have heard you, that the religious right is going counter to what God... Anybody want that one? Who's tackling it? It's a good one. It's a really good one, especially in an election season. Nobody's brave enough.
I wanted to.
Go.
I disagree with the tenets of the religious right. My friends are over there. I have friends that are in it. I have friends that are teaching it. I disagree with them. And I disagree with them in love. I do not allow their concepts to inculcate into my thinking and my actions and the people that I'm teaching. So from that, we have different parties, different movements. We're dealing with reality. You have to get, as she said, galvanize. You have to work with and galvanize the people in your movement. Don't disrespect them like they may disrespect us. We have to have, there's something odd about right and left in America. And this isn't the time to talk about, but we just have to move. You have to move on. Remember when, God told Joshua, move on. Moses, my servant, what he said, my servant is dead. Move on. Move the people on. We don't have time for, Moses was great, but it's time to what? Move on. And so that analogy is you have to, you will get stuck. You will get disempowered if you allow a group or people to take you off the track that you believe that you have been divinely inspired to be on. I could preach all night.
All night.
Could I add? In a kind of a different matter, for me, my relationship with the African American community, in which I have some amazing mentors, my organization as a tributary came from First Amy Church. And yet some of my hardest pain points have also come from the African American community. What has kept me in the game has been my love and appreciation. And when I see the dissonance, I don't quit. I don't say, oh, those whatever, and blow them off and walk out. I don't walk away. And I think in the same way, a lot of people who are in the religious right are people that I love and care for, and at one point, I thought they were hearing the voice of God. And so again, that is another place where there's a lot of dissonance and confusion in terms of sometimes their actions seem inconsistent with at least what I believe is on the side of God. But I think that love and appreciation, again, I think seeing the greater goal, the justice, to keep us in the room, in the game. Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner said, we got to stop hating, but start connecting. I think that when we see the people in the room, we don't put labels when we have relationships, right? It's a lot harder when we have that relationship to put on labels and walk away. And so I think even in the religious right, they're doing a lot of good things too. Maybe in the topics we disagree vehemently, but there are also a lot of good people doing good things. And they think that they're on the right side of God, just as we think we're on the right side of God. So I think there is also an element of humility that we should always walk in, just in case that we are on the wrong side of God.
Our religion, in case we all get saved together, in Christianity perspective, the religious right, they're saving people, in their way. So,
I think life is a test, and God puts all these elements around us as a test. And the ones that pass the test don't harbor any hatred towards others and just do their thing. As Pastor said, just do our thing, and different horses for different courses.
We are taught in our texts for the Jewish faith that there are times to engage a fool, and the very next verse it says, don't engage the fool. Engage the fool or don't engage the fool. And the question is, if you engage a fool, what you perceive to be a fool, somebody who is really counter to you, if you turn yourself into a fool, you're going nowhere, right? So if their behavior is returned by you with the same kind of behavior, we're not in a productive place. That's not the person you choose to engage. You engage a fool who maybe from ignorance, lack of exposure, lack of education, who you enter into dialogue with, you may actually get to that other side, to that space where you are heard and they are heard. And maybe you get to a place of building real bridges and real interconnection, and you can walk together across a bridge. And you can walk together, and you can maybe even hop on their boat and row for a bit and relieve them. It takes a long time to get to that space. It takes a long time, but by moments like this of building bridges through the Holocaust Museum, we are saying these bridges are worthy of building, and we are worthy of engagement, and none of us in this room will be engaged to a place of being a fool, because we're saying relationship matters. There is no easy space. Religion right now is, it's causing a lot of fires. And fires can be really damaging. They can also be really warming. It's a really tough place to be in. It's really hard to sit in this room, in this beautiful space, and not feel the threat of what happens when people demean other human beings, see them as less than human, see them as less than created in God's image. It's really hard to be in this space and not call out the danger in that. Religion will sometimes lead people that wrong way, but it can also lead us in a better way. So what I hope for us is that we do better, that we continue to build these bridges, that we continue to engage, that we see each other's face to face, that we see each other that spark of God, and that we rebuke when rebuke is necessary, and we engage and educate and learn together. Thank you to the Holocaust Museum of Los Angeles for hosting us this evening, for allowing us to be in dialogue, and thank you all for being here to help create bridges. And I will say good night. Thank you to our panelists.
Thank you.